6 a.m., the boardroom swallowed Evelyn and the doors sealed shut. In Amari's pocket, her signed charter weighed heavier than steel. If those doors open without her, the whole company hits the floor. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap like, and share this video. The more voices we reach, the louder these stories become. And drop your city in the comments. Let's see where love finds us. I was the last mop on the 34th floor, humming under the breathy hush of the air handlers, when the elevator dinged like a dropped coin. The doors slid open on a woman whose perfume reached the marble before she did. Citrus and something expensive. Then Evelyn March stepped out in a black dress that glimmered like a midnight argument. I'd only ever seen her on screens. Quarterly calls, town halls, photos in the lobby where the light always found her face and decided to stay. In person, she was softer and more real than any picture, thick, curvy, the kind of presence that made the whole hallway feel smaller. And tonight the lacquer on her control had cracked. She leaned against the brass rail and blinked too slowly. "Miss March?" I said, "the way you speak to a storm you're not sure will pass." Her smile missed its timing. You're the night crew." "Amari," I said, "building services." "Amari," she repeated, as if the word were a sip of water. "The board dinner ran long. I told the driver to go. I was fine." She glanced at the corridor, then down at her stilettos. "I am less fine." "Sit a second," I said, wheeling my yellow bucket aside to clear the bench by the window. Rain stitched the city glass into grey lace. She sank down carefully, her dress tugging at her hips, breath catching in a half-laugh that felt like surrender. Security had thinned to one guard downstairs who'd waved me through on a nod. The ride-share queue would spit out a stranger who'd take one look at the headquarters address and post it, because that's what the world did to women like her when they stumbled. I thought of my daughter asleep 2 bus lines away, a school project about constellations taped above her bed, the sitter's text at 10:17. "She's out. You good?" And the way the meter of my life beat to things that could not be dropped. "I can get you home," I said, slower than the rush in my chest. "If you want that, no charge, safer than standing curbside." She studied my face as if I'd put a contract on the marble. People do that when you're black and wearing coveralls at midnight. They measure before they trust. Something passed across her expression that wasn't fear. Relief, maybe, or bone-tired gratitude. "You have a car?" she asked. "It runs," I said, which was not untrue. She nodded. "Thank you, Amari." I walked her to the service elevator where the walls didn't judge, her hand finding my forearm once when the floor trembled. I kept my palms open, deliberate, like I do around broken glass. In the garage, my Corolla waited with its peeling clear coat and the little paper star my daughter Lila had taped to the dash, "Wish big" in purple marker. I opened the passenger door. Evelyn settled in with the careful choreography of someone used to being watched. The drive out slid under wipers that sang the same beat I'd used on 100 floors. Push, pull, lift, breathe. She stared at her reflection in the side window. Streetlights gilded the edge of her profile. Up close, she wasn't the ice that rumours painted her. Her lipstick had smudged and one earring was missing. The tired in her eyes wasn't cheap. "Do you always work this late?" she asked. "Late is quiet," I said. "Quiet pays the sitter. Day shift is school drop-off, pick-up, life in between." A small smile warmed her mouth. "How old?" 8. "Lila, if you ask her, she's an astronaut already." "Of course she is." A pause. "I never had children. There was always one more meeting." She pressed her fingers to her temple like she could rub out the board's voices. My hand stayed at 10 and 2, the way my grandfather taught me in another state, another season. Red light, green light. Slow. I thought of the names on the janitorial roster that had become numbers over the last year. How layoffs didn't make the marble less slick or the windows less wide. I thought of the way people pretended not to look at my badge, but still saw the title beneath my name. "You were at the dinner," I said, "because sometimes the only kindness is acknowledgement. You don't owe me your story, but if keeping it inside is heavy." She let out a breath that fogged the glass. "They want cuts," she said, voice soft and steady like a confession to the rain. Departments that never sit in those rooms became percentages on a slide, and I heard myself defending numbers like they were people, because that's how I cope. But they are people. I know that. I know. We took a left on Franklin. The city opened into the quieter streets of the river district. She closed her eyes, and for a second I saw a woman no one was allowed to comfort. The word sexy gets tossed like a match. What I felt instead was the ache of a human trying to hold the line inside themselves and failing, just for now. "You grew up where?" she asked, waking herself with the question. "South Side, then over on Clemente when Lila was born. Her mom got sick, and when she got sicker, I stopped pretending I could be two men. Halcyon posted for nights. I grabbed it." "I'm sorry," she said, and it didn't sound like a script. I shrugged. Grief had burned away most of the words I used to have for it. "We make lunches. We count stars. We clean what other people don't see and hope they never notice us doing it." I heard my own tone, careful but edged. I hadn't meant to put my resentment in the front seat. She turned her head. "I notice," she said quietly. "Maybe not well enough, but I do." The building she called home rose out of the rain like a ship. Doorman, glossy planters, a canopy that softened the weather. I pulled up to the curb and killed the engine. The quiet fell so sudden my ears rang. "Let me walk you in," I said. "You've done more than enough," she answered, but when she stood the world tilted, and she gripped the doorframe until it learned its place. Just to the elevator. Inside, the lobby was marble again, of course, and the night concierge pretended not to recognize his own CEO, which made him the kind of professional who deserved a raise. The elevator hummed. On the 32nd floor, we stepped into carpeted silence. "I can make it," she said, smiling as if to apologize to the hallway for existing in it. She found her keys and missed the lock twice. I steadied the door, nothing more. The apartment beyond flicked on with a dimmer glow. Art on concrete, a bowl for mail with nothing in it, a kitchen that gleamed like a show. Rain ticked at the glass. "All good," I said, stepping back. "Drink some water. If you're dizzy, sit on the floor, not the bed." She laughed, surprised. "Is that a rule?" "From 1,000 school nights," I said. "Hard to fall off a floor." She leaned against the door, the steel cool at her shoulder. "Amari?" I paused. "Thank you for treating me like a person when I was behaving like a headline." "You're welcome, Miss March. Get some sleep." I walked back to the elevator, feeling the strange weight of a moment that wanted to mean more than it did. In the car, the paper star on my dash caught a streetlight and glowed a little. I called Mrs. Olu, who'd been sitting with Lila since 9. "I'm downstairs," I told her voicemail. "Money on the counter under the bowl. Tell Leela I'll be there when she wakes." At home, the apartment smelled like the lemon cleaner we can afford and the crayoned wax of my daughter's universe. I checked her room. Her braid trailed across the pillow, arm flung toward the ceiling as if pointing out a constellation I'd missed. The sitter had left a note with a smiley. She read 2 chapters, argued with the moon is winning. I stood there longer than a man needs to, just watching her breathe. My phone buzzed with a calendar alert from work. Mandatory all hands, 9 a.m., auditorium, New Direction. The subject line sat there like a stone in a still pond, throwing off quiet rings. I thought of the boardroom, of the slide with the neat columns, of the way Evelyn's voice had softened when she said people. I pictured the faces from night shift lined up in rows. Me, Rosa, Will from maintenance, the young kid who always wore headphones with one ear off because somebody had told him to, wondering who would go from names to numbers by noon. I set the phone face down, kissed Lila's forehead, and slid onto the couch with the kind of tired that doesn't ask permission. Outside, rain kept time on the window. Somewhere up in the Tower District, a woman I barely knew was swallowing water and trying to sleep. I wasn't a man who believed in omens, but the room felt charged, like the air before thunder. Maybe it was just the calendar alert humming against the wood. Maybe it was the way her eyes had changed when she said my daughter's name aloud. Either way, something was going to break in the morning. I closed my eyes and counted breaths. 4 in, 4 hold, 6 out. The way Lila and I do when the world tries to run faster than our hearts. At 8:59 a.m., I would be in the back row under the exit sign, hands clean, badge clipped, waiting to hear if our lives were going to be moved by someone else's math. For now, in the soft dark, the city washed itself, and the star on my dashboard kept a tiny promise to glow. Don't forget to subscribe for more intense cinematic love stories. Your click helps us make the next chapter. Morning came in pieces. The scrape of the trash truck outside, the glow of Lila's nightlight fading from gold to nothing, the ache behind my eyes when I remembered the calendar alert. I lay there a breath longer, listening to my daughter's soft snore through the wall, and counted 4 in, hold 4, out 6, until my chest loosened enough to move. In the kitchen, I set water to boil and opened the lunchbox we'd decorated with planets. 2 small sandwiches, an apple cut into crooked stars, a sticky note that said, "You are brilliant," in purple marker, because she believes my handwriting makes things true. When Lila padded in, braid a little untidy and face still warm from sleep, she climbed onto the chair like she'd been climbing that chair all her life. "You look worried," she said through a yawn. I looked like a man who lost an argument with gravity. I brushed a crumb off her cheek. "Big meeting today." "Are they going to make you clean more?" she asked, genuine concern, like there might be an index somewhere of how many square feet a dad can mop before he disappears. "I'll still come home to you," I said. "That part doesn't change." After breakfast, we walked to the bus. Rain had rinsed the night smell away, and the air was the kind that makes you squint at the world like it might be kinder in this light. She held my hand until she saw her friend Naya, then waved in a way that made the crossing guards smile. I watched until the bus turned, then stood there a second with my palms open to the morning like I could balance it. The train was crowded with badge lanyards and coffee steam. I tucked myself into the corner by the doors and tried not to watch the screens. Market tickers, a local anchor's teeth, an ad for a new gym meant for people whose membership was a kind of religion. My phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. "You going?" And I answered with a thumbs up, because if I typed what I felt, I'd spill it all over the screen. Halcyon's lobby sparkled like it had been waiting all night just to do it again. Will from maintenance, his hands bigger than truth, nodded to me by the loading bay. Upstairs, the halls were busy in a way they never were at 9. Marketing in black turtlenecks, engineering in hoodies, a finance guy whispering into a phone as if someone might arrest him for saying the wrong decimal. The auditorium swallowed us. Night shift folks clumped together near the back like we were afraid of contaminating the carpet. HR handed out printed agendas nobody read. The stage glowed corporate blue. The front rows filled with executives who sat like they were about to be photographed, which they probably were. I chose a seat under the exit sign with my knees touching the row ahead and anchored my attention to the red dot on the fire alarm. One small honest thing that only blinked when it meant it. At 9:04, the doors at the front opened and the hum folded into hush. Evelyn March walked onto the stage in a white suit that made the light act right. Her hair was pulled into a low twist that looked like it had been engineered to keep every call she'd have today from touching her face. She was unmistakably the same woman I'd walked down a quiet hallway 7 hours earlier, but the room put armor on her, the CEO layer you feel even in your bones. Still, there was a softness at the edge of her mouth you wouldn't find on the lobby portraits. I didn't see an earring out of place. "Good morning," she said, voice hitting the back wall and settling the way a perfect stone lands in water, sharp then ripples. "Thank you for being here." She didn't look at the teleprompter. "I'm going to say this plainly, so you can hear it exactly once and tell your families tonight without guessing." In the second row, CFO Henley folded his hands in a way that said he wanted to refold the moment. "No layoffs," Evelyn said. The words landed so fast the room forgot to breathe. 90 days, company-wide. Silence, then the sound of 100 people remembering they had lungs. Someone up front said, "What?" like a prayer they hadn't expected to work. Behind me, Rosa's fingers found my sleeve and squeezed. Evelyn continued before the buzz could drown her. "We're instituting a 90-day freeze on reductions. Executive bonuses are suspended for the remainder of this fiscal year." She clicked the remote. A slide appeared. Bold letters, simple math. "We're selling 1 aircraft and 2 unused leases. We're postponing the new Jackson campus lobby renovation and diverting that budget to frontline wages and safety staffing. Effective immediately, all contracted night shift custodial staff will be brought in-house with benefits aligned to our full-time employees." Will exhaled a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. I blinked at the slide as if it might change if I looked wrong. "I've heard," she said. In rooms where the lights are too bright, that people become numbers, so we can make harder choices. I did that last night. I am not going to do it today." She paused. "Numbers matter. So do names." She looked up toward the back where the night crew clustered. For half a second, less really, her eyes met mine. The glance was nothing and everything, acknowledgement without spectacle, a line thrown across a room that was not going to save anybody but might keep them seen. Her face didn't give away a single unprofessional thing. It didn't need to. CFO Henley stood, a careful half-step toward his mic. "Evelyn, operationally." "We'll handle operations in Q&A," she said, not unkind but final in a way that made his jaw tick. "I'm not done." She clicked again. "Shadow shift." The words filled the screen. "Starting this week, every vice president and above will complete one night of shadowing with our operations teams over the next 30 days. No observers, no PR. You will mop, stock, lift and log. If you are physically unable, you will be assigned to dispatch and support, and you will listen. I'll be first. Tuesday, 2 a.m. A collective noise rolled through the room. Surprise, discomfort, a few stray scoffs that sounded like furniture dragging. HR blinked hard. Someone from legal began typing with the fervour of a novelist who had just remembered their deadline was yesterday. Then she did something no CEO does on a stage like that. She took her hand from the podium and placed it flat against her chest, a small human gesture that cut the room in half. "If you have ideas about how to do your job better or safer," she said, "I want to hear them from you. We will establish a listening council with representation from night shift, security, cafeteria, facilities and customer support. You'll be paid for your time. Participation will not affect performance reviews." Rosa whispered, "Lord, let this be real," like she was testing the word real in her mouth. "Now," Evelyn said, "questions." They came like rain after drought. A manager asked about runway. She answered with a ship's worth of numbers and a calm more convincing than the numbers deserved. A marketing lead worried about optics. She said, "If morals look bad, optics need new glasses." Laughter broke the tension, short and grateful. Henley took his turn. "What about the board approvals? The investors?" "I spoke to the chair at 6, she said. "We have conditional support pending a plan to maintain EBITDA targets without reductions. That plan is on slide 22. She clicked. Charts, arrows, an ugly line bending toward a less ugly line. "We will do the slow, unglamorous work. Renegotiate vendor contracts, cut vanity spend, prioritize retention to reduce rehiring costs. And, this is not a footnote, we will keep the people who keep this place a place." Applause started in pockets, and then, to my own surprise, I heard my hands join in. Not the kind of clapping you do because you're supposed to. The other kind, where the skin on your palm says something your mouth can't. When it ended, the room broke apart into clusters like mercury. I stayed seated long enough to watch the executives migrate toward the stage, then stood, intending to slip out before anyone asked me to translate what I was feeling into anything polite. Amari. My name behind me. I turned to find her there, not on the stage, but in the aisle under the same exit sign I'd chosen like a talisman. Up close, the white suit was more forgiving than the lights made it. The line of it made for a body that had been drawn curves first and refused to be corrected. There was a faintness under her eyes that only someone who had watched her fog a car window could recognize. "Miss March," I said, careful. "Do you have 5 minutes?" Her voice had lost the auditorium's extra inches. Not an order, an ask. I looked to Rosa. She lifted her chin toward the door like, "Go." We stepped into a side hallway where the carpet swallowed footsteps. She didn't waste the time. "Last night," she said. "Thank you again. I won't mention it beyond this." The relief in that promise told me she'd thought about the power imbalance and what a rumor could do. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "You made a call in there that I don't have words for yet." "I'm going to need them," she said, a small, wry smile. "We're setting up the council by Friday. I want you on it." I stared at a point on the wall where the paint had bubbled under a bad patch job. "I work nights," I said. "Daytime meetings. I have school drop-offs, Lila. We'll pay overtime and schedule around you." She softened the edge of the ask with the shape of my kid's name. "I don't want a photo op, Amari. I want to fix what's bent and learn what I've never had to learn." She hesitated. And I want someone in the room who will tell me when the floor is slippery because I spilled the water. You have people for that, I said, but it came out less defensive than the words. I have people who think I don't spill, she said. They're wrong. In the silence that opened, the hum of the building threaded through. Air handlers, elevators, the low constant liveness of a place made by hands. I thought about the risk of being visible, about managers who remember faces when layoffs unfreeze, about my daughter's sticky note. You are brilliant. About how sometimes you can't keep your head down and keep your soul too. Okay, I said. I'll do it. I'm not going to say what you want to hear. That's why I asked. She handed me a card with a number written in real ink on the back. Text me times that work. If anyone asks why I'm meeting with a janitor, tell them I needed to talk to a person who knows where the light switches are. Against my will, I laughed. You should probably know where your own light switches are. I'm learning, she said. The moment ended because moments always do. She squared her shoulders, and the armour slipped back on. I have a board call, she said. They're surprised. That makes all of us, I said. I watched her walk away into a cluster of suits that tried to absorb her and failed. I slipped my phone back into my pocket with a card tucked next to the paper star Lila had given me. On Halcyon's internal chat, messages were lighting up so fast the app couldn't keep up. Praise, panic, memes of CFO Henley as a cat knocking a chart off a table. Will texted me, "Did that just happen?" I sent him 3 mind-blown emojis and 1 mop. By noon, the open office looked like a storm sky, charged and shifting. I scrubbed a coffee spill by the glass wall until it squeaked honest, then stood a second to see my reflection in it. A man in navy coveralls, a badge that said Building Services, a face trying to learn how to hold hope without gripping it too hard. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, the one in ink. Room 42, 5 minutes? I typed back, on my way. I turned, but a commotion near the elevator stalled me. CFO Henley, voice tight, moving fast. Behind him, members of the board filed out of a conference room, faces set like fresh concrete. The chairwoman's mouth was a line. A security guard I didn't recognize lifted his radio, spoke low, listened. As the elevator doors opened, Evelyn stepped out alone, expression calm in that way that means every muscle is working. Henley said, loud enough to carry, "This isn't tenable." She looked at him, then past him, and for a heartbeat her eyes flicked to me as if to say, "Don't move." Or maybe I imagined it. The doors tried to close, caught themselves, opened again, waiting, as if the building itself understood that whatever happened next would redraw the floor plan. "Miss March," the chairwoman said, voice like cold glass, "we need to talk. Now." Evelyn nodded once, slow, "Let's." Then, almost imperceptibly, she breathed in, 4, hold, 6, and stepped back into the elevator. The doors slid shut on the kind of silence you hear before thunder. Room 42 turned out to be a storage room someone had persuaded into usefulness. A round table, 4 chairs that leaned a little, a whiteboard stained with old arrows that had never found their destination. I checked my phone again, her message still there. Delayed. Board wants blood. Leave me what I asked for. 3 things you'd fix tomorrow, how we prove it works. I uncapped a marker and wrote like my handwriting could hold the building steady. 1. Slips at the loading bay. We need weighted anti-fatigue mats where the concrete sweats after midnight. Measure incident log goes to 0. 2. Trash route timing. Cardboard crush gets jammed during 1 to 2 a.m. when cafeteria closes. Move it to 3 a.m. so 2 bodies aren't trapped back there. Measure time T reduces by 40%. Staff reports no blocked exits. 3. Supply swaps. We waste time walking to the far closet because only day shift gets the good microfiber. Put a locked caddy on each floor. Measure turn time per floor drops, fewer chemical burns, more consistent shine. QA can check with light test. I left the marker on the table like a clean fork and underlined measure, because that's the only language the top floors really speak. Then I took a breath and added a 4th in smaller letters. 4. Stop talking about people like furniture. I didn't leave a measure for that. By the time I stepped back into the hall, the open office had a different electricity. Nervous, huddled, too many people pretending to check emails, but waiting for someone to announce what the future would be. Rosa cornered me by the vending machine. "Did you see the internal memo?" she asked, whisper breathless. "No." Henley called a special board session for 7, says alignment. She rolled her eyes so hard it squeaked. Alignment, my foot. Will lumbered up, wiping his hands on his work pants. I heard legals printing the employee handbook like it's a Bible. That's never good. I could feel the old instinct in my shoulders, the one that says, put your head down, be small, outlast the storm. Another voice, newer, said, you were invited into the room. Show up. I spent the next hour doing the work I always do, fixing what's broken so people can walk through their lives and think things just work. There was a coffee spill by the pantry that had soaked into the grout, a hand dryer in women's 16 that blew like a sad mouth, a fire door that didn't latch unless you coaxed it like a bad relationship. The steady made my blood run right. At noon my phone buzzed, saw your notes. Good. Add, report near misses anonymously. Push for it. I smiled at the screen and texted back, done. Stay standing. She didn't reply. I pictured a conference room where numbers tried to eat a person for making a choice that put people before the numbers for once. I pressed my palm against the cool glass wall and let the building's hum settle under my skin. I almost made it to the service elevator when someone said my name like a question and a warning. CFO Henley stood there in a charcoal suit that had seen more Paris than our entire night crew. He wore patience like cologne. You're Amari, he said, as if I'd applied for the privilege. Building services, I said, sir. I hear Ms. March has taken an interest in your perspective. His smile didn't move his eyes. We're all very grateful for the work your team does. Truly. But you must understand there are financial realities. Such as gravity, I said, before I could stop myself. Costs a lot when people fall. A muscle in his cheek twitched. Cute. We don't make decisions on anecdotes. We don't mop on anecdotes either. I kept my voice level. My hands stayed open at my sides. We log every fall, every burn, every time the trash compactor jammed and someone put their back into fixing it and couldn't pick up their kid the next day. We just don't send those numbers to your slides. He took a step closer, a palm on the rail like he owned the stairs and my future. You should be careful, mister. Amari, I said, taking my step back. And I should be getting back to work. People leave coffee rings like it's their job. Rosa's text hit my phone as I walked away. Boy, you trying to get fired before the freeze ends? I sent her a single shrug and a picture of a caution sign. Afternoon slid into that bright tired period where even the walls yawn. I took the train home for pickup, Lila's backpack thumping my thigh as we walked. She chattered about a constellation project, how she'd taped tiny gold stars in the pattern of a lion and named it Dad because he keeps roaring at laundry. We made noodles. We did teeth. She read to me about a girl who builds a balloon out of grocery bags, and I pretended not to cry at a sentence about floating anyway. When she fell asleep with her arm thrown up at the ceiling like she was holding hands with the sky, I watched the rise and fall of her back until the clock said what it always says. I left a note for Mrs. Olu with cash in the bowl, kissed my daughter's temple, and put on my navy coveralls. The city at 1:40 a.m. is made of people who keep things alive while everyone else dreams. Street sweepers, nurses on the bus, their laughter too big for the hour, a cook on a smoke break staring at the way the light warms the steam. My Corolla hummed like a tired animal, the paper star on the dash catching every red light like it had been built to glow at exactly the wrong moments. Halcyon was a different building at night, honest about its bones. No perfume of meetings, just the tang of chemicals and the soft drag of mops. Will nodded from the freight elevator, eyes crinkling. Shadow shift? He asked, like you ask about a meteor shower you're not sure is real. She said Tuesday, 2 a.m., I said, checking my watch. 1:58. And then the elevator pinged and she stepped out. Not in a suit, not in anything that pretended she was ghosting her own life. Dark jeans, boots with tread, a grey tee under a blue zip-up that the company's old logo stitched over her heart. Hair pulled back. No makeup except the kind you can't take off. Am I late? She asked. You're on time, I said, and it felt like a sentence bigger than the hour. We gave her a caddy, gloves, sanitizer, a sleeve of fresh microfiber. She slid the gloves on with a small concentration that made me like her more than any speech had. Will walked her through the machine, the auto scrubber that pulls dirty water into its belly and leaves the floor dry enough to part. She listened like people who are used to hearing themselves don't often get to. We started with the lobby, because pride is a kind of gravity here. I showed her the place by the revolving door where the rain sneaks in and leaves a slick nobody sees until they're on the ground. She knelt, CEO kneeling on stone like the world had dared her to, and ran her fingers over the seam. It feels fine. That's the trick, I said. Looks fine, feels fine, eats you anyway. She set down a cone and angled it, then watched how traffic bent around it. We think about lines, not bodies, she said. We're going to fix that. We moved together. Mop, lift the sign, run the scrubber, test with a step. Will disappeared to deal with an emergency in the server room, a leak that wasn't water, and Evelyn and I were alone for the first time since the hallway last night. The building hummed like a throat clearing. They're going to try to remove me, she said finally, like she was telling me a weather report I could already smell. Tomorrow morning, emergency vote. I don't need you to say anything about it. I just wanted to be where the floor is real. What do they want you to do? Rescind the 90 days. Demonstrate fiscal responsibility by returning to the planned reductions. Make a public statement about market discipline. She rested her forearms on the handle of the mop like a pilgrim at an altar. If I sign, I keep my job. If I don't, I keep something else. Yourself, I said. Myself, she repeated softly like a surprise. Do you think any of this matters if I'm gone? I wrung the mop, listening to the water drip back into itself. My daughter made a constellation and named it after me, I said. It's just tape on construction paper, but in her head it holds up the sky. The only way it keeps holding is if I keep acting like it's real. She looked at me for a long time that didn't feel long. That's the best strategic framework I've heard all day. Her phone vibrated on the service desk. She checked it, jaw tightening. 7 a.m, vote. They're leaking to the press about leadership differences. A pause. If I go the council, the shadowing, I can make them harder to kill, but not impossible. Then we make it contagious, I said. Put more of it in more hands before sunrise. She nodded once and started moving faster, wiping a handrail like she could polish a culture, asking what hurts in our bodies after 6 hours, why the supply closet lock sticks, which floor manager sneaks us leftover pastries like it's contraband kindness. I answered, and the answers were small and very important. At 3:17, we stood in the loading bay where the concrete sweated and the air tasted like metal. I showed her the angle where a cart always drifted right toward the stairs. She stood where it would hit, body braced, and watched it roll, then caught it with more strength than the white suit had suggested. Weighted mats, she said, breath a little higher. And a lip installed by Friday. We'll find the budget. They'll say optics. They can buy sunglasses. She set the cart's brake. If I'm here tomorrow. We finished the shift slowly, the way you finish something you want to last. Before she left, she scribbled a note and slid it under the handle of the room 42 door. Charter, she said. If I can't deliver it, I need you to. HR opens at 8. I'm a janitor, I said, taking the envelope. It was heavier than paper. You're the person in the building I trust to tell the truth, she said. Titles are costumes. We're past Halloween. She looked at the clock. 4:08. Dawn thinking about itself behind the river. Do you need a ride? I asked. She almost laughed. Yes, but not yet. We walked to the lobby. The revolving door whispered at our shoulders. She reached into her pocket and pressed a small, cool rectangle into my hand. It was a keycard. No name tag, just the thin promise of access. If something happens and they lock me out, she said, voice low, would you make sure that envelope gets where it should go? I will, I said, even if they lock me out too. We stood there a second, the way people do when the next moment is too big and too close. Her phone vibrated again. She looked at the screen, then at me. They moved the vote to 6, she said. They're afraid of daylight. The elevator pinged. She squared her shoulders, and the armor came back on. But now I knew where the seams were. Don't move, she said, and this time I knew I hadn't imagined it. If the floor shifts, hold to what's level. Then she stepped into the elevator, the doors slid shut, and the building held its breath like a body waiting for the first crack of thunder. Dawn scraped itself across the river like a match that didn't want to catch. I sat on the low stone wall outside Halcyon with a paper cup and the envelope in my jacket, counting 4 in, hold 4, 6 out, until my breath stopped trying to run without me. The building's glass held the sky in pieces. Somewhere on the 35th floor, a set of people were preparing to decide whether one woman's promise could outlast their fear. My phone buzzed. Lila. A selfie, braid crooked, missing front tooth, a constellation of gold stickers on blue paper. Under it she'd typed, "Dad, wish big." The paper star I kept on my dashboard rode in my wallet now, edges soft with touching. I pressed it flat and told myself that sometimes you don't wish, you show up. At 5:47, security tightened like a belt. 2 men in suits I'd never seen before stood by the private elevator with the posture of furniture that thinks it's the room. Henley arrived at 5:52, jaw already clamped, tie too clean. He didn't look at me because people like him don't. They look through. Evelyn texted at 5:55 in. "If this turns, deliver to HR at 8. Shadow shift schedule attached, signed." I swiped through the attachment. It was a calendar grid with names already slotted. March, Tseco AM Tuesday, done. VP Ops Friday. Legal, finance, marketing. No observers, no PR. The signatures at the bottom weren't typed. Ink lived there. The private elevator pinged at exactly 6. A board member I recognized from news clips, Chairwoman Feld, all angles and pearls, stepped in with 2 others. Henley slipped in after them. The doors closed on the stale sigh of expensive air. I went where I always go when the building is trying to decide its soul, the loading bay. Concrete sweats before the sun finds it, and danger there is quiet. The cart drifted right, like it always does, and I put my shoulder into it with muscle memory. My mind kept replaying midnight, Evelyn kneeling to feel a seam that lied, the way her voice had said myself, like she was lifting something heavier than a mop. At 6:19, my radio crackled, Will's voice, winded. Server room leak wasn't water. They overcooled to hide a spike, alarms suppressed. He cussed softly. If legal asks, we never had this conversation. Everything important at Halcyon seemed to happen in the spaces between what people said aloud. At 6:31, the freight elevator opened and Rosa rolled in a stack of boxes labelled mats. Waited. She winked. "Purchasing processed at 4:11 a.m., she said, hushed triumph. Someone signed with an actual pen. We laid one down at the bay's lip and watched the cart hit it and stay true. The sound of the rubber meeting concrete was the smallest, sweetest thud I'd heard in a year. At 7:02, a message slid across my screen from a number I didn't know but recognized by how it didn't waste words. They will call you soft. Let them be brittle. I didn't have time to answer. Henley came around the corner faster than shoes like his were designed to move, nearly skidding on the unsolved patch. Instinct is older than contempt. I put my hand out to steady him. He caught himself on the rail, eyes flashing at the humiliation of almost gravity. "Careful," I said. "Costs a lot when people fall." He stared at the mat like it had personally offended EBITDA. "This isn't over," he said, which is what men say when something is already slipping away. He turned to go, then paused as if a thought had just arrived fully clothed. "If Miss March is removed, there will be a transition. I suggest you remember where you're paid from." "From my kid's lunchbox," I said, "and from not letting people split their skulls on our watch." He made a noise like a laugh, wished it were a cough, and left. At 7:18, the elevator deposited legal, 2 lawyers with expressions that read neutral but meant calculating. They headed toward HR. It was time. Room 42 smelled like dry erase and lemon. I slid the envelope under the blue glass paperweight on the table. Listening Council, Charter, the first page read, in ink thick enough to catch light. Bullet points, not poetry. Established Night and Ops Listening Council, paid time, protected speech clause. Anonymous near-miss reporting system, no retaliation, quarterly report to board. Shadow shift program, mandatory VP+, completion tracked, non-compliance affects bonus. Safety budget line item ring-fenced, mats, rails, PPE audited. Supply parity across shifts, locked caddies per floor, procurement KPI aligned. At the bottom, measure everything, believe people, fix what hurts. Under that, her name. HR Director Nazira found me there, breathless. She lifted the paperweight, scanned, blinked. "If they remove her, they'll try to rescind." "Then you'll have a copy with a timestamp," I said, "and a building full of people who saw it." She hesitated. "You understand what stepping into this makes you?" "Visible," I said. "I'll live." The hallway outside shifted. A murmur picked up, not gossip, but weather. Doors opened. A junior product manager with pink hair put a hand to her mouth like a church at the wrong miracle. Someone said, "Oh my God," not loudly, and then the private elevator chimed and gave the room back its breath. Evelyn stepped out alone. No white suit, no lacquer. Dark blazer over that same grey tee from the night, hair back, eyes bright with something that wasn't relief and wasn't defeat. The chairwoman followed, face set like marble that had decided against sculpture. 2 board members trailed the other way, on phones already. Henley emerged last, took 3 steps toward the mic they'd hastily rolled into the lobby, then stopped because it hadn't been rolled there for him. Evelyn didn't ask for the room. The room offered itself. People who'd pretended not to see me all year stood shoulder to shoulder with night shift. Rosa was there, Will, the security guard who always told me which elevator would misbehave next. Marketing in black turtlenecks. Legal, lips thin. Nazira, clutching the charter like scripture that had decided to be useful. "Good morning," Evelyn said. No microphone. She didn't need one. "Thank you for being early for your jobs, and for being early for this." She let the quiet run a beat, then 2. "The board met," she said. There was a motion. She didn't use the passive voice. To rescind the 90-day freeze, to reinstate planned reductions, to suspend the shadow shift and listening council proposals. She paused. There was also a motion to remove me. A ripple moved through the lobby like wind moves wheat. She lifted a hand, not to quiet us, but to keep time with herself. "The first motion failed," she said simply. "The second failed." She let the words find their way. "The third failed, and the fourth failed by 1 vote. For a second, nobody understood what that meant because our bodies wanted a simpler story. Then it landed. Not just stayed, but stayed with the promises intact. I don't remember starting to clap. I only remember the way my palms hurt like something true. It wasn't a thunderous applause you see in movies. It was a rough sound, edges uneven, like the sound of a building being held up by hands. Evelyn turned slightly toward the board that lingered like a stain. "We will make our case to the market with numbers and the truth. We will do the slow work you can't film. We will ask vendors for terms and accept that some will walk. We will cut spend that makes rooms pretty and keep spend that keeps people upright." She looked at me then and didn't look away. "We will measure everything and believe the people doing the work." Henley cleared his throat. "Optics. If optics dislike safety," she said, not even turning her head, "optics can buy sunglasses." Laughter cracked the tension. It wasn't derisive, it was grateful. She lifted a paper, my handwriting, my underlines. "These," she said, "are the first fixes from the people who know where the floor lies. Weighted mats being installed today. Trash route timing. Shifts with cafeteria close. Supply parity, procurement KPIs updated by end of day. Near miss reporting. Live by Friday. The council names by noon." Her voice didn't wobble when she said the last part. Mine did, and I wasn't speaking. "If you have an idea, you will not be punished for bringing it. If you fear you will be, bring it to me. My phone is on the charter." She lifted her chin. "CFO Henley has tendered his resignation, effective immediately." A beat. "We wish him well." Silence, surprised, satisfied, startled, moved across the marble. Henley's face did something involuntary and human. Then he smoothed it into something else and walked away. "Amari?" Evelyn said. Hearing my name pressed into the air like that did something to my throat. I stepped forward because the only way out was through. The crowd parted and then pretended it hadn't. "This is the person who told me where the floor is slippery," she said. "He's joining the listening council as a founding member. If you want to know what this is for, look at him, and then go do your job with the same care." I didn't have a speech. I had a life. "We're not heroes," I said, voice not built for lobbies. "We're the people who keep the light switches where you expect them. If we say something's bent, it's only because we don't want to watch you break. That's it." The room exhaled. It felt like a wind that had been holding its breath all year finally remembered how to move. The rest of the morning unspooled in work. Mats came out of boxes. A junior designer volunteered for Tuesday at 2 a.m. like she was signing up for a concert. Legal sat with Nazira and the charter and began rewriting clauses with ink that could stand a courtroom. Purchasing called our supplier and learned the phrase net 45 isn't a law of physics. We'll fix the hand dryer that blew like a sad mouth by hitting it with a screwdriver in a way that looked like magic, but wasn't. Around 10, I ducked into the hallway with the bad patch job so I could breathe, where nobody needed me to be anything but a man counting to 6. I texted Lila a picture of a weighted mat. She sent back a lion made of stickers with Dad under it, fierce and lopsided and perfect. Evelyn found me there, which said something about how she'd decided to spend her day. Up close, she looked like she'd slept 2 hours and won a war that would need winning again tomorrow. The curve of her body was the same as last night, thick and unapologetic. The strength in how she stood was something more than Pretty had ever given anyone. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know what that word means today," I said, and it came out almost like a laugh. She leaned her shoulder against the wall beside mine, exactly at the bad patch. "They'll come back," she said quietly. "Not with a vote, with friction, with 1,000 small no's." "We'll answer with 1,000 small yeses," I said. "Mats, caddies, routes, names." "And when they say I did this because I had a moment," she said, eyes amused and not, "a man I barely know will keep telling me where the floor is." "You know me," I said, surprised at how true it felt. "You know the part that matters." She nodded. For a breath we were only 2 people under humming vents, not a CEO and a janitor in a building full of witnesses. Then voices rose in the lobby again, the sound of a company relearning the shape of itself, and she pushed off the wall. "Tuesday, 2 a.m.? she asked, like we hadn't just lived it. "Tuesday, 2 a.m., I said. She smiled, a small, tired, real thing that reached her eyes. "Go home when you can. Tell Lila we put stars on the floor." "I will," I said. Outside, the sky had decided to be blue, with no committee vote. I walked to the bus with my hands open and the paper star in my pocket, edges warm now from the heat of a day that had almost bent the wrong way and hadn't. At the stop, I counted. 4 in, hold 4, 6 out, until the world matched the rhythm of a life that might, if you kept showing up, keep holding.